Welcome to Musings from Arledge, and we have a special guest today. I'm very excited. We have Trojan legend Sammy Knight with us today. Sammy, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your background. I think that people who've been watching USC football as long as I have been will already know who you are and what you've done, but we may have some new people that don't know. So you played at USC in the 90s, 93 to 96.
Yes.
You were a two-time All-Pac 10 player, played on the 1994 team that won the Cotton Bowl, the 1995 team that won the Rose Bowl. In 1996, you were first-team All-Pac 10, team MVP, team most inspirational player, team captain. And while that was a disappointing season, we'll talk about that a little bit, you played a huge role in the Notre Dame streak-breaking game, which is still one of my favorite games of all time. You spent 12 years as a safety in the NFL. You were a Pro Bowler. You finished with 42 career interceptions. I believe you're in the New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame. So a very long and productive NFL career. And we're a hell of a football player because I remember watching you play. So if you don't know who Sammy is, look him up. Look at some of the games he played in because he was an excellent football player. And I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thanks. Glad to be here for sure.
So your family has a long history with USC. I mentioned that you had played, but you had two other brothers play at USC also. Ryan, who played before you, and Daryl, who played after you, right?
Yes, my older brother Ryan was a #1 player in the nation, top tailback coming in. I had the USC record for freshman rushing yards as a freshman tailback in 1983 at USC. My younger brother Daryl came in I believe it was 1998. 98, I think, was his first year. 97 or 98 was his first year, and he was a linebacker there and did well.
Yeah. So we're about the same age. I think I'm 2 years older than you are, but your brother Ryan started in 83, right?
Right.
Yeah. So which is right about the time that I started to watch USC very carefully. And so we've seen a lot of the same history. We're at a point right now where USC fans, I think, are starting to see a program on the rise, right? Because we had some, as you know, we had some pretty tough years before Lincoln Riley came along, way too many of them. And I want to talk to you about that because you've been a part of a program that was on the rise, and you also were a part of a program that started to go the other way.
Right.
And so I kind of like to get your perspective. In 1993, USC, your freshman year, USC barely misses out on the Rose Bowl with really a heartbreaking loss to UCLA, interception from the 2-yard line that I think longtime USC fans will remember and don't want to talk about.
Right.
And then you had the Cotton Bowl win in 94, the Rose Bowl win in 95, and it looked like the program was on the upswing. And then 96, a 6-6 season, and really the start of the downfall of John Robinson's second tenure. I'd kind of like to get your impression as somebody who was a part of a program on the rise and then on the fall. What's your perspective? What is it that a program has to have to come back from mediocrity to come back to the top levels of college football?
It starts with great leadership. Have to have great leadership. The players have to buy into the coaching staff and the culture and what the staff is trying to build, what they want the team to look like, the mentality of the players on and off the field, a certain amount of professionalism, and we all have to have the same goal, and that's either to win a championship, starting with the Pac-12 or Pac-10 back then, and then also national championship aspirations as well. Normally when you go to USC, that's ultimately what you want to try to achieve to win.
So when you started, John Robinson was coming back for his second tenure. He was obviously a legendary figure at USC already and had a ton of success with the Rams. So in some ways, I suspect when he came back to USC, he was sort of in the same position that Lincoln Riley is. You're talking about a coach who was already well known for his previous success. I assume that makes it easier for players to buy into the program because they already trust the guy.
Well, yeah, it definitely makes it a little bit easier, but I think, it was very similar to what Lincoln Riley went through. I'd even say a little bit more difficult at the time because John Robinson came back with 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I think they hired him maybe 3 weeks. I'd have to check the dates, but 3 weeks before the February 4th signing day, which was the only signing day during that period. And they had basically about 4 weeks to put a class together. There was rumblings that that John Robinson could possibly come back, but a lot of the kids at that time, after Larry Smith and what happened in '92, a lot of people were just fleeing to other schools. At that time, Arizona, a lot of kids were going and playing in Arizona, and then also Washington had just won the national championship in '91. I myself, I was going to go. I had my mind made up that I was pretty much going to go to Washington, and at that time, a lot of other people were spreading out throughout the country, Texas, maybe at OU and some other schools. But when John Robinson was hired, Mike Garrett came in and really changed a lot of things right there. When he came in and hired John Robinson, that made the rest of the nation stand up and say, okay, they're really trying to win, similar to what they did with Lincoln. From that standpoint, I knew that John Robinson was a great offensive coach, and he's an offensive-minded guy. So my only question was who was I going to have defensively? For me, it was great having John Robinson, but at being a defensive safety at the time, I was All-American, one of the top safeties in the nation. For me, I just wanted to be coached by the best DB coach or the best, defensive coach that I could be, because I wanted to go to the NFL. And so for me, John Robinson ended up hiring Dennis Thurman. Dennis Thurman, as you know, is one of the greatest Trojan safeties of all time, probably one of the greatest Trojans of all time, with his influence throughout the program, all the DBs and defensive backs, corners, and safeties that he's influenced is unbelievable. And so Dennis Thurman was recruiting me, and at that time, I pretty much was headed to Washington. They had pitched me and Laurie Malloy being, co-safeties back there, and I was on my way. And DT just kept talking to me, and he was like, "Hey, man, you understand? I can coach you. I can get you to the league, and the power of SC, the education that you receive. I know you want to go here. I know you've always wanted to go here." And he just kept working on me. And then what really sold me was when DT sat me down and we really started talking X's and O's. And he really showed me how I could improve and the things, and really taught me football. And so that really helped me. And that from that point on, I mean, it still was a hard decision. I actually waited 2 or 3 days after the signing day to sign, because I was so conflicted. Washington, they had the #1 defense in the nation. They had great defensive back coaches, but once I talked to Dennis Thurman, I knew he played for the Cowboys. I knew that he coached all these guys, and he sat down. I talked to him and showed me what he could do for me and how he could help me. And the bond that I had with him, even to this day, I mean, that's what sold me on going to SC. It was the best decision of my life.
Now, we're going to bounce around a little bit, but you said something that's interesting, because it sounds very similar to what some recruits may be asking themselves today. John Robinson was known as a great offensive coach, particularly in the running game, right?
Yes.
And so I think that a running back or an offensive lineman looking at the opportunity to play for John Robinson would be sold. Probably the way a quarterback these days, if offered by Lincoln Riley, it's almost a no-brainer that you're not going to find a better quarterback coach. But you probably have some defensive guys who are saying, okay, but what does that mean for me? I'm a linebacker, I'm a defensive lineman. What does Lincoln Riley need to do to answer questions for players like that? Defensive guys who are interested in USC, but they're not as sure as the offensive guys might be.
Well, I think if you're Lincoln Riley, you just got to ask yourself, you got to say, do you really believe in Alex and what he's doing? And go from there and just evaluate your whole staff. I mean, whether it be offensive and defense, I'm sure every year most coaches, they go and they evaluate their staff, and they have to be honest with themselves. Is our talent deficient? Or, is our scheme deficient? Is it a little bit of both? Can he honestly do that? Do I believe that he can do that? And also he has to understand this. If I believe that he can do it, maybe he needs some help. Maybe I bring in an older guy, an older veteran from the NFL, older veteran that can give him some tutelage, that can give him some help in some areas where he might be deficient. I can't answer those questions. Those are questions that Lincoln has to answer. What I can say to speak about is I have to really commend this staff, offensive and defensive, for the job that they've done. Really coming in and changing the culture of this team, because I mean, we have to remember realistically where this team was last year. They were not only 4-8, but I mean, it was bad from a culture standpoint. And you're seeing the ramifications of the lack of development the last 4 or 5 years play out, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they haven't been able to develop players the last 4 or 5 years, whether it be the previous staffs, athletically and tactically, or technically from the standpoint to where you have that depth. Normally, when you're developing players, you have that depth. So there is a miss somewhere, you know. And there's been, you can't necessarily blame individual coaches. I think it's, you know, just from the head coach down. I mean, the development the last 4 years hasn't been great, you know, and you know the players have to take some onus on that too as well.
Yeah. No, I don't think anybody would doubt that the talent level on both sides of the ball, but especially defensively, because Lincoln did so well in the transfer portal offensively, is not where USC would want to be. And you're right about last year's team. Last year's team was not only a 4-8 team, but frankly, it was a team that was in complete turmoil. I mean, it looked to the end of the season like a lot of the guys in the roster may have quit, didn't want to be there, was my impression. But here's my question for you, because look, Lincoln Riley probably believes in Alex Grinch. He's known him for a number of years. He brought him over from Oklahoma. That tells me that he thinks that Alex Grinch is a good coach and can get him where he wants to be.
Right.
But one of the things you have to be as a head coach is you have to be a salesman, right? Because in order to recruit, in order to get people to show up and buy tickets, you have to be able to sell that you're on the right path. And I think right now that Lincoln Riley may have something of a sales problem on the defensive side of the ball. Just because the defense, which I think looked like it was playing better at the start of the year, the last half of the year is tough to watch defensively.
Right.
So my question for you is, let's assume that Lincoln Riley believes in Alex Grinch. Is he in a position right now where he can sell Alex Grinch and this defensive staff to high school recruits, to transfer portal recruits, to high school coaches who obviously are going to be talking to their players? Or is that a problem right now?
Well, I think it kind of really depends. You know, it's really going to come. This next year is going to be super important. You know what I mean? This is probably the biggest year for them because of the way everything ended. And as bad as a lot of people think it might have been, the Tulane team was a good team. And we have to give them credit for they played hard. They played. We definitely should have finished the game. We should have won. But had they won that game, you know, you win that game, you come back, you feel great about yourself. All the things are solved. There's no problems. Where the schedule they had this year was very favorable, very favorable. I think everybody from USC could look at the schedule and say when you go down that schedule, there wasn't a team on there that you, other than Utah and Oregon State, that you would say, oh man, you know, we better really be ready this week. You know, other than that, we should really dominate those games. This year, when you look at the schedule, it's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be a lot tougher because, I mean, I don't know if people really understand have looked at what's going on in the Pac-12, but the quarterbacks in the Pac-12, and I'm just saying this as a football defensive guy, are a nightmare. They're going to be a nightmare this year. Yeah. This might be one of the best quarterbacking conferences I've ever seen in my life, as far from the last 20 years. I mean, when you look up and down the line, you got Bo Nix, you got Caleb Williams, you got Michael Penix, you got DJ Ugalele, you have Cameron Ward, you know what I mean? You got Shedeur Sanders, you've got Sam Hartman that they're going to have to face from Notre Dame, or Taylor Keogh. I mean, when you look at it, every week you have a X on that quarterback. Their best player is going to be their quarterback, and you have to start there. And that's not the case in most seasons, but week after week, you have these dual quarterbacks that can do it with their arm, they can do it with their legs, and they can do it with their mind. So it's going to be, you're going to have to really address your defense and attack it with a strong mentality. And they have time, they can do it, and that's what the offseason is for. You really have to go into this offseason with a plan.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, with those quarterbacks coming back, and just the fact that the way offenses are in college football these days,
it's hard to stop people.
Good offenses beat good defenses these days. You saw it with Alabama gives up a ton of points now. You saw Georgia give up a lot of points. Michigan 50.
Yeah.
So it's going to be difficult no matter what. I'll say this. I think you're right. That last game was a real kick in the gut because you win that one, you're sitting at 12 and 2, and you could legitimately say that if Caleb Williams doesn't get hurt in that conference championship game, I mean, SC's up 17-3 with the ball hurt. You think we probably win that game. We're probably in the playoff. The loss of Tulane is not devastating because Tulane's a bad team. They're not a bad team. They had some good football players,
they play good ball.
Especially offensively.
Right.
But the nature of the loss hurt, right? Because that's a game. You're up 15 with 4.5 minutes.
It's the way you lost. It's the way you lost.
Yeah.
And you can say the same thing about the defense. It's not a lot of teams are giving up points, but it's the way you're giving up points. It's the style in which you're giving up points. And therein lies a little bit of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And in fact, if you go back to the Cotton Bowl, when SC's up 45-30 with 4.5 minutes left, like the one thing you can't do under those circumstances,
give up a big play.
You play defensive back at a very high level. I played in college at a very low level, but I know this. If you're up 15 points with 4.5 minutes, there's one thing you can't let happen. But what frustrated me about it is, USC was in a cover zero. They're manned up with no deep help, and they bring 4. They didn't brush the linebackers. I don't know why you would ever be in a cover zero if you're not blitzing, and I certainly don't know why you do it with 4.5 minutes left. So my frustration was, I look at that play and I thought the only way you can lose this game is if you give it away. And we started to give it away with that defensive call, which leads to a 60-something yard catch. And I think this is not good. Yeah. It doesn't define Alex Grinch's career. It doesn't. But you look at it and say, that ain't good. that put us on the path to
football is football, Division 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Anytime you have a situation like that, you know what I mean? Especially when you're up 15, they need 2 touchdowns and the extra point and a 2-point conversion to tie the game.
Yeah.
I mean, you really want to play safe. You want to protect yourself, and you might bring a blitz, but you can't play cover zero in that situation, and especially zero without the blitz. I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah.
So I mean I think everybody would be in agreement with that. And you're gonna have bad calls in certain games, and you're gonna have those situations, and you hope the players can bail you out in that situation. And a lot of times you have great calls. Like I saw some situations where he had great calls. I mean, he had some calls where, the players are right there to make the tackle, but they didn't make the tackle. But that's a tactical and philosophical way of tackling. Like I think a lot of times when you watch SC play, they're and this happens on bad tackling teams. You miss a couple tackles and everybody says break down, come to balance, make it, and nobody's being the aggressor. So now you're allowing the offensive player to dictate to you where they can go. And I think a lot of that happened especially the last 6 to 8 games. They weren't aggressive enough from a defensive standpoint on attacking the ball carrier.
Yeah, and it's interesting. USC had so much success early in the year causing turnovers that I think the defense got a little addicted to turnovers. And by the end of the year, you saw a lot of guys trying to strip balls instead of driving through a ball carrier, wrapping them up and taking them to the ground. And I think that was part of the tackling problem, is you had way too many guys reaching and smacking on the football instead of driving somebody into the dirt.
Yeah, there was some of that too, but I think for the most part, it was really apparent that they really needed to attack the football a little bit better. You had guys breaking down 5 yards away from the ball carrier, and you got to really close that space down and make him feel uncomfortable. And it's just like a player in basketball. If you give a guy a couple layups and then he shoots the free throw line jumper and you're not in his face, he starts getting comfortable. Next thing you know, he's hitting those Steph Curry threes, and once they get warmed up and get the juice going, it's really hard to stop a great offensive player. So, you really want to make them uncomfortable, dictate to them which way you want to go to your help. And because one great thing that I can say about that defense is that they all ran to the ball. They ran to the ball and they played hard. They played hard. It's just one person misses a tackle or one bad a technique error, and then it's out the gate. And you saw so many times where it'd be 3 or 4 guys surrounded and everybody's breaking down. Well, somebody has to be the aggressor. You know what I mean? Like it's just a small thing. It's a small, big thing that they need to clean up. and it really could help them if they understand, force field pursuit. If they start understanding that, then they play much better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, look, USC, because of the guys they have coming back, including Caleb Williams, we'll talk a little bit about Caleb in a minute. They're going to be a top 5 team preseason next year, and so the question is whether the defense can improve enough. It doesn't have to be the 2008 USC defense with Matthews and Laga, but can they improve enough, especially with this difficult schedule, to allow what should be a fantastic offense to carry them to a big season? And if they don't, then you probably wasted the most talented quarterback you're going to see in the next 20 years at USC.
Yeah.
So that's really the question. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that yet, but that's
that's definitely a question. That's something they have to address. I mean, really, you're going to be starting working on these teams, playing against these teams and these schemes. I'm sure that they're going to start their players working against these schemes in the offseason. You know what I mean? You know who you're playing, you know what they're going to run. So you need to start introducing those plays right now. You can't wait till, the season starts to start introducing those plays to the players. They'll start learning those plays. If I'm there, they'll start seeing those plays next week so they can visually start to understand how they're trying to how they're trying to attack. And you start introducing it. Maybe every other week it's a different team. You don't say this is Washington. You just start introducing those concepts and those plays to them so that they can understand from a passing standpoint. Because I think sometimes, especially in that Utah game, the things that I saw was the underneath players a lot of times in the zone was higher than the deep player. And then, they were getting killed underneath. So you got to have one underneath, one over the top. Just simple things that, you've got to really hone in. And they're young guys. They're young guys and they're learning and they're going to make mistakes. They're human. You know what I mean? Like we all want SC to be 12-0 and 11-0. But the reality is that you got to have some bumps and bruises and go through some ups and downs. When I was there with Lane on the staff, that first year we went 8-4, 8-5. I can't remember. The next year we went 11-2. So you would like to. They believe that there's going to be a jump from year 1 to 2. And we had the tackling issue that first year. It was nothing like this, but still we had to address that, and that's the one thing we addressed in the offseason, and it really improved the next year. So
that was a big difference between those two teams. That was a big difference between those two teams. Is substantially better tackling.
Right, substantially better tackling. We just got more aggressive. We talked about things that we needed to do, work on, and the players took accountability to it and got better. But those are just things that they have to work on. They have to get more depth, definitely depth, and, they should be better.
Let's talk about Caleb Williams for a second. Obviously, a fun guy to watch. My impression, you tell me whether you agree, my impression is that this is a guy who is going to be a franchise NFL quarterback because there probably aren't more than a handful of quarterbacks in the NFL that have the level of talent this guy has in terms of making the throws and being able to move around and make people miss. I mean, he's pretty extraordinary. What's your impression of Caleb and what you think he still maybe those areas that he can still improve, because he was only a sophomore this year?
Yeah, I think, and this is his first full season playing. That was the most remarkable thing about it. Remember, he came in, I'm here in Houston, Texas. You're in Dallas. So, we remember when he came in the Texas game and turned it around with UT and Oklahoma last year.
Yeah. So
to see him come in and what really impressed me was the level of leadership that he showed throughout the team. There was no doubt on the team who was a leader. And from the top guy to the walk-on, he embraced everybody. He held them accountable. He brought them in, made them all feel like they were part of the team, which they were. But I'm saying he made everybody feel like they were Jordan Addison. If you dropped the ball, he was picking you up. It was no finger pointing. He was a really good leader, and even defensively, you never saw him get flustered. He just controlled the things he can control, went out and played, and I mean he was a great leader this year. That's the number one thing that stood out to me, and I think that's the one thing that most GMs in the NFL are salivating for, to get a guy like that, because he can change your program. You saw what he did to this USC program, and he embraced it. He didn't run from it. He knew what it was. He wanted to go do that, and he went out and he did it. And he started it, and the best thing about it is that he's not finished. He's not finished, and those are things that he needs. We continue to build leaders like that, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. He's clearly a special guy,
Yeah.
and you're right. It's not just his physical attributes, which are. I mean, I think he's the most talented quarterback I've ever seen at USC.
Mhm.
But it's more than just that. He is a
Right.
great leader.
Right.
He's also cool under
Yeah.
pressure. Right, this
Right.
guy. You know, it could be a really tough situation, and
Right.
he can have people all over him, and he's just
Yeah.
gliding around in the pocket without a care in the world. It's pretty impressive to watch.
No doubt. If you can get a leader and you can get a guy that's as competitive as he is, if you get that leadership competitiveness and you add athleticism to it that he has and arm talent, I mean, now you're talking about a guy who can really be a generational type talent. And you hate to put that type of pressure on him, but he wants to be a generational type talent. So it starts with him. And he's come out and he's done a great job for SC. And I'm sure he's just looking forward to getting ready to go in this next offseason so that they can try and achieve their goals next season.
Yeah. Do you follow recruiting closely?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, from out here, yeah, yes, I do. I really, I like this. I like the class they're putting together.
Tell me your thoughts on this recruiting class that probably, at least with the high school kids, probably 90% done, but with the transfer portal, I don't know. What do you like about it?
Well, I think what most viewers have to understand about recruiting rankings and recruiting classes is that the difference between a 3 and a 4-star is so minute. You know what I mean? It's all in the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And a lot of times, you get 5 stars, you go get 5 stars, but if they don't fit in your system and you play them in the wrong position, they're a 3-star. You know what I mean? You have to allow kids to do what they do well. You have to see that. And a lot of the times in high school, you have to be able to understand that the best player might be a quarterback. He might not be a quarterback in college. He might be a safety, or a tight end might be a tackle, or a linebacker might be a safety, or a safety might be, so you have to understand and be able to project where you want that kid to fit in your system. And that's one thing that Utah does good as far as evaluating talent, finding talent that can fit in their systems, developing that talent to fit the position that they want to play, and then allowing them to go out, coaching them and allowing them to go out and play. And I'm sure Lincoln and his staff, I didn't follow Oklahoma that much, but I'm sure that their staff, they'll probably be able to do that same thing as well.
Yeah. So USC clearly landed some big time stars in this class. The Malachi Nelsons, Mekhi Lemon, Zachariah Branch, who I think is going to be unbelievable. And Attacking Curtis, a linebacker from Louisiana. I think there are some USC fans that are a little bit worried that USC is missing out on some of the bigger name talent. We think maybe because some other schools are more aggressive with paying money and the NIL thing. Is this something you're worried about? Do you think USC needs to make some changes in how they handle NIL?
Well, I mean, you know what? I'm not on the ground out there, so I can't really speak specifically to it. But I mean, I don't know too many schools that really, if we really we're really went into that could put together a better NIL collective than we could.
Yeah.
I mean, if USC really wanted to do that, and if that's the problem, I'm sure that could be solved. That's one thing that I have to give Lincoln Riley and his staff the most credit for, is coming in and changing the last culture and getting the president and the AD to buy in to giving them the resources to be able to compete versus the LSUs, versus the Alabamas and the likes of Georgia, because you and I know it's totally different out here in Texas and in the South than it is on the West Coast, how they view recruiting, how they recruit, and the way they go about it. So in order for us to get these kids, we have to be in a similar realm as far as how we approach these kids and what they're seeing. When they go to Georgia, they see these huge complexes and they see these multi-million-dollar complexes at Texas A&M, and everything is there for them. And when you go back to USC, we don't have room to build a big complex like that. So if you don't have room to build a big complex, there has to be something else that you bring to the table for these kids. What is it? It can't just be sunshine and the beach. You've got to talk about the opportunities in the offseason that they have to work out with all the NFL players that come up and want to work out at USC. You have to talk about being able to train in the offseason with some of the fastest players in the world, fastest track athletes in the world, and some of those things that LA has that these other states don't have, just those type of things.
Some of the schools seem to be more aggressive in terms of offering what we'll call name, image, and likeness deals, although maybe pay-for-play deals for some of these high school athletes. My impression, based on what USC seems to be doing, and on what Lincoln Riley said at his press conference, is that USC's a little leery of getting into that game.
Right.
You were a part of a locker room in college. Are there some risks in offering big money to these 18-year-old kids to get them to something?
No doubt. There's risk in offering money to anybody. You know what I mean? And especially offering that type of money to kids in Los Angeles. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, $1 million or $1 million in Oklahoma or $1 million in Alabama. You can't go on Rodeo Drive in Alabama. You know what I mean? Like, when you go out there and you have that kind of money, I'm not saying that you can't do anything stupid. You can't do anything irrational or immature, but it's a little different. You know what I mean? Like, that's the gift and the curse of Los Angeles, and one of the draws to Los Angeles. I used to tell people the biggest thing about becoming a USC athlete is that you are treated like a professional in Los Angeles automatically because you're recognized. Not only are you recognized, but you're recognized in the second largest media market in the nation. Yeah. So, you go out there, and when you go out, you're not just, in some club in Alabama or some club in Oklahoma. You're out there. Your Doja Cat is right next to you. You know what I mean? LeBron might be right over there. Snoop is down there. You know what I mean? Like, so, you're hanging amongst these millionaires, and you're hanging amongst these stars. And, if you don't watch it, you really think you're a star, but you don't have the millions they have. You know what I mean? You don't see that these people get up in the morning and work out. So that's the biggest thing that you have to worry about with Southern Cal. You have to make sure that these kids are dialed in and understand that it's okay. It's great to be around them because, now you see what you want to go after, and you can see what you don't want to do as well. But it's just understanding that, hey, you have to go out. If you go out, you have to come back and do your work. And then also just the trappings of Los Angeles, it's just the trappings of Los Angeles that you have to worry about. But the great thing about it is that you learn that at a young age. And fortunately for me, when I went there, I had leadership. I had Willie McGinnis, I had Johnny Morton, I had other guys, Joe Barry, all these guys, Mike Salmon, and guys that would take you under the wing and show you the right way to go about things. And, to really, handle your business and make sure that football was the main thing. The main thing was the main thing. And, we worked out during the week before we even went to practice and certain things. So, I mean, if you have that mindset, you can capitalize on that. You know what I mean? Because what Los Angeles is, it shows you what's out there. It's the city of dreams. And you're seeing those dreams right before your eyes. If I work hard, I can get that. I can do that. You know what I mean? And so that's the grind. And not only can I do that, but I can work out with them and learn how to do it even better. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's the opportunities that you have out there that you just don't have everywhere else. And, you're exposed to the media. So, yeah.
No, you're right. LA has some dangers that you may not have in Tuscaloosa, but there's also a draw there. I mean, as great as Alabama has been, it's different than when Reggie and Lindell and Matt were playing for Pete Carroll, and you have Hollywood stars all over the place. I mean, those guys were big time celebrities.
It's different, and that's what sets USC apart. The media. I mean, you know what I mean. The level of exposure that you get at this school is second to none. I mean, it's not close once you really when you're at your height and all these other schools are at their height. I mean, it is what it is, and that's taking advantage of that. Just look at this year alone. Look at this year how we dominated the airwaves, and I mean, we were 11-1, but we didn't win a Pac-12 championship, and we didn't go to the Final Four, but USC was the talk of the town. So you can imagine if you get the defense turned around a little bit, and also, I mean, and we can't absolve the offense as well, because I think, it's a team game. And those are the questions that Lincoln has to answer. And, he's done a great job. So by no means am I saying that this is what every team has to do after every year. Yep. But now the question for them is, hey, you got a new offensive line. Can you run the ball when you need to run the ball and finish games? Like you saw that they were having trouble the whole game running the ball in the red zone. They couldn't run. Yep. They couldn't really run. They couldn't do well. They had a couple of runs, but they couldn't run consistently when they really needed to run the game, to run the ball to win the game. Right. And those are things that you just come back, you get better at it, and hopefully next year that'll be a bright spot for them.
So let's talk about Lincoln Riley for a second. I mean, The guy's won 85% of his games. He's
Right.
had now 4 quarterbacks finish in the top 2 of the Heisman voting in only what, 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
What makes Lincoln Riley special? Why is he successful?
I think for one, his leadership. I think his ability to communicate his vision, not only to his quarterback, but allow it to filter out from the staff to the team. And he's done a great job of having that level of humility where he's approachable. It seems like he's approachable to his coaches, approachable to his players, and he really cares about his players. You can tell that about him and his staff. And I think he's a genuine coach, a genuine great guy, and his X and O game is on point. You know, he really understands defensive schemes, and he has a plan on how he's going to go out and attack those schemes game by game. He doesn't get into and he allows his players to play fast. He keeps it simple, allows his players to play fast, and he allows them to do what they do best. You know, if you're a good blocker, you're going to block. If you're a good wideout and you run these routes, these are the routes you're going to run. If you're a fade guy, you're a fade guy. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't ask people to do what they can't do offensively, at least. You know, if we can't run, we're not going to run. We'll pass. You know, and you know he does that. You know.
Yeah. So let me ask you. We got a couple minutes left. I'm going to go back to your career at USC. Favorite moment playing football at USC?
I think my favorite moment was always winning the Rose Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, winning. Like, you got to win that Pac-10, Pac-12 championship to start, to even have a chance now to get to the championship. But just winning, man, winning was my favorite memories, winning that Rose Bowl, because like I said, we had my freshman year, we tied for the Pac-12 championship, and then the second year we second place, and the third year we won it outright. So 3 years we were in it the whole time, basically. And to finally get that win was big for us because we felt like we were growing. But then that next year, the lack of development over the years, we fell off. So it'll be imperative for them to not take for granted the great year they have and pat themselves on the back, but just attack it with the same veracity that they attacked this year with, and go from all levels. Special teams too. That's a big one. It's 3 facets of the game, and I think that's another thing about Lincoln is when you're an offensive play caller, and especially in the college game with it moving so fast. I mean, when offense comes off the field, normally he has to sit down and talk to the the quarterback, and, hey, what are you seeing? What are you doing? Blah. So I'm not saying from what I see, I'm sure he's aware of what's going on, but you really have to delegate that to that coach, and if you're not, then that's taken away from what you're doing offensively, unless you have, great offensive minds, in the background working, which I'm sure he does. But, that's all we're always going to question that when you lose, and when you win, it's okay. But he just has to make sure that, that there's a voice defensively, there's a voice offensively, and that special teams wise, there's a voice as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I sort of felt the same way about Pete Carroll. He was such a great coordinator,
right,
that you hate to take him away from that,
yes,
from that role.
Yeah.
And Lincoln Riley probably is the best offensive coach in the country. You don't want to take him away from that role.
I wouldn't take him away.
No, but it's tough to be the offensive coordinator and also be the coach of the whole team, right? That's a difficult balancing act.
Yeah, but I think it's even tougher when you're the offensive coordinator. When you're the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator is defensive coordinator, but there's no special teams coordinator either. Yeah. So there's I'm sure there's probably a lot of, I wouldn't say chaos, but there might be question as to who is to this, who is to that. And there's a different voice for each situation. So if you don't have a special teams coordinator that's over everything, then your running back coach is the kickoff guy, the punt guy is the DB guy, and the punt return is the wide receiver guy. And I'm sure they have similar terms, but I'm sure they're getting some different terms as not terms, but different mentality as far as how I want you to run down and hit this ball on this kick. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that could be the possibility, but it's always better when you have one voice. I know that. Yeah,
makes sense. Before we get off of your time at SC, that 1996 season was obviously disappointing, but I got to tell you, one of my favorite moments ever as a USC fan was that Notre Dame game that year. Overtime win that actually required something of a miracle, right? Notre Dame had to miss an extra point to keep USC within 8. I started watching USC seriously watching USC right at the time that horrible streak started.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I've seen a lot of great USC wins in the, almost 40 years I've been watching.
Mhm.
But I don't know that I've ever felt the sort of relief I felt that day, that finally, right?
Yeah.
Finally, we got these guys.
No doubt. Yeah.
What do you remember of that night?
It was a long time coming. I mean, we had always played them close, and for some reason that Leprechaun would always come away with something. And I mean, we played them on. I mean, that the year before we went to the Cotton Bowl. I mean, we were like 10-1, 9-1, and we played them, and it rained the whole game, so they just were able to get 3 yards per carry. I mean, it was just the craziest thing ever. And for us to get that win, it was a big win just because I think it was one of Lou Holtz's last games, I think, too.
It was his last game at Notre Dame, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of his last games. So we were like, hey, we got to send this guy home with an L, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
But it was a great team effort. Everybody played hard, a lot of big plays that night. The thing I remember most is just, the combativeness on both sides, because it was going back and forth for a while. We had a couple of big plays, and we had a really talented defense that year too. I mean, we had a lot of guys. I mean, I think like everybody on that starting lineup went to the NFL and played. And so, I mean, it was a lot of talent on that field on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And everybody, we were just going after it. And CJ Robb and Lou Holtz, those historical great college coaches on both sidelines looking at each other, and then the players competing, and it's USC, Notre Dame, and the fans were going, and the cheers, and it was a heavyweight match.
Yeah, I tell you, one of the things that I still remember that I was surprised about at the time was the 2-point conversion play. Robinson decided just to run. He just ran counter. Just gave it to DeLon Washington a counter right between the tackles. We're just gonna be tougher than you on this play.
Yeah, that was his mentality when he got in there, because the reason why he did that is because my freshman year we played Notre Dame. I mean, not Notre Dame, UCLA, and we were tied going to the Rose Bowl, and they had rolled the roses on our sideline, and it was like 1st and 2 or 2nd and 2, and he had Rob throw it. And it was unfortunately an interception. And from that point, I remember he was basically like, hey, we're running this ball in, because his mentality was a running mentality. Yeah. And Mike Roddy at that time was our offensive coordinator, and he was more balanced. Yeah. So it was just a changing of the game. But it was we had a great time that night. That was a great win.
Yeah. All right. Before we run, what are you up to these days?
I'm retired. I'm out here I live in the Woodlands, Texas. I'm out here in Texas right now, just with my family, man, enjoying that time. And I'm thinking about getting back into coaching at some point. My daughters are growing up now. I got 2 in college, 1 in high school, one younger one as well. But yeah, I'm thinking about getting back into that at some point. But right now, I'm just with the fam.
Excellent. Well, listen, Sammy, I appreciate you joining me today. This was a lot of fun, a lot of good information. Next year, big year.
Next year, big year. A lot of big decisions to be made. But I just want to say congratulations to the Trojans on the great year that they had. You know what I mean? The job that they did to come in and change that culture, the coaching staff and the players. I mean, really, it was a tough loss, a tough way to end the year. And I know we're never happy with that, but I mean, they really did fight on this year and through a lot of adversity from last year and a couple of years before. And, because it felt like Clay Helton was getting fired every year. It felt like they were going to fire him every year. So, for the players to go through that, that's pretty tough. When you're not sure if your coach is going to be here. And they persevered through it, they fought through it, and they battled this year. And hey, what can you say? I mean, they lost 2 games by 1 point. You know what I mean? Like, as bad as we're talking about it right now, it's you think the house is crumbling and everything, but they lost 2 games by 1 point. And hey, at the end of the day, they got next year, come back, get some help, get some depth, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Look, when you're writing an article or doing a video every week for a website, when you have a bad game, you do a lot of complaining. At least I do. But let's not lose sight of the fact that this was one of the great turnarounds that you're ever going to see. And the future is very bright with Lincoln Riley and
no doubt
this program. So
no doubt.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.